Everything we do here at James Project focuses on caring for vulnerable women and children because we believe that's the call that God has placed on every one of us as Christians.
Okay, we are back with another episode, and today we have Dan Thompson with us. He's been a team leader for how many years now, Dan?
2010 was the first year, so this will
Wow.
be the 15th trip.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, so you and I have known each other for a long time, and but somewhat before either one of us were following Jesus, because your family owned the local bar in town, and you were behind the bar, and I was on the other side, and super grateful that social media didn't exist then, because the memories that would be showing up 20 years later would be really embarrassing. Actually, longer than 20 years, but I won't date myself or you. So,
Right.
so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, not a real exciting story. Born and raised up here in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, in little town of Lindenville, town of about 5,000 people. Was very blessed to grow up on a gravel road a couple miles outside of town, right next to a dairy farm. So lived in the country, played in the backyard, ran in the woods, but I didn't have a lot of friends. My dad was my best friend, and my free time was just over on the farm working and playing, and so it was a wonderful place to grow up. But like I said, it just out in the country, you just learn to entertain yourself and enjoy the beauties that nature has for us.
Right. So, in your family, you said your dad was your best friend, right? And you had one sister.
Yeah,
Just
I
one.
have one sister. She's 2 years older.
Mhm.
Um, she left home early, so she wasn't a big part of my life. We ran in different circles, and we didn't really get along like lots of brothers and sisters do. So, um,
Right.
so it was a mom, a dad, a brother, a sister. You know,
Out in the
we didn't
woods.
we didn't want for a lot. We didn't have a lot. We just that's just the way I thought it was. You just learned to get by with what you had in the country, and
Mhm.
and so I you know, I look back on it, and you know I don't know if it was too good or too bad or what it was, but I just never had any big global dreams or aspirations or plans to go anywhere, do anything. You just got up every day, did what you did, and went home and went to bed. That's just the way you
Yeah.
grow up in the country. So,
And we grew up in the same area, so I hear you.
yeah.
But
Okay.
so clearly, your life is a little different now. You don't live way out in the country anymore. You still live in the same area, right?
Right.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how your life is a little different now.
Well, I think I think it's called growing up. you know, we obviously I am much older than we were back then, and you know when you're kids, you don't think about the big picture. You think about what's right in front of your face, and you think about yourself, and you think about instant gratification and joys and pleasures, and we or I hadn't realized that joy was a choice. I thought joy came from circumstances and things are around. So you did things that were fun, and you felt joy, and you did things that weren't fun, and you were sad, and so I guess the biggest difference between now and then is to, you know, take take a step back and think of the whole picture, and think of others in finding joy in the little things.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, you mentioned that you thought you didn't realize joy was a choice. I think people would say a lot of people feel that way, that it's based on your circumstances. So why would you say it's a choice? Like how do you choose it, and compared
Mhm.
to just letting your circumstances determine it?
Yeah, it takes intentionality. You got to you got to realize that we're blessed just to be here. We're blessed to be alive. And I'm blessed to be healthy. I'm blessed to have family and friends around. You're blessed, we grow up in a society, especially now with social media and stuff, of instant gratification, and that you know we we get bored quickly, and we our senses go up and down so quickly, and we don't realize that the joy is the foundation of it all. You can choose to be grumpy, you can choose to be happy.
Yeah.
You have to choose to not be bored. You have to choose to not be angry. You have to choose to. I mean, our emotions, I say, are like the warning lights on our car. They just tell us that something's wrong, and it doesn't mean we have to react to them. And
Right.
that's a big lesson. I was a very, very angry young person growing up. I would get, fighting mad. I'd never get in fights, but it just my blood pressure would go up, and I'd be so angry and so frustrated all the time over crazy little things that really didn't matter in the big picture of life. So, uh, my stress level is much lower now than it was when I was younger. So,
Mm-hmm.
I, you know,
Age is not necessarily a bad thing for those things, is it?
no, no, people sometimes ask, well, what's it cost to be a Christian? And I say, well, you
Hmm.
get rid of some anger, and you get rid of frustration, and you get rid of selfishness, and you get lots of the things that it costs you are good things. So,
Yeah. So you're saying that before you had a lot of the anger and that kind of stuff, but being a Christian, you give that up. So I would take it you haven't always been a Christian.
no, my mom brought us to church when we were little. I remember enjoying going Tuesday nights to choir practice, and it was just something fun to get off the hill and get into town, and go sing some songs and hang out with the young kids, and it just something was we did. I
Mhm.
don't, I can remember saying the words, "I accept Jesus Christ as my personal Savior," because they gave you a wooden cross and a necklace, and it was a cool thing to say or do. But I don't remember as a child understanding or comprehending the scope of it. And so,
Mhm.
as a teenager, you get making your own choices, and I started to say I don't like to go or don't want to go, and we weren't forced to go. We were allowed free choice, and
Mhm.
so I thought that was a good choice. So for the next 25 years, I went around trying to be my own boss and make my own decisions and steer my own course, and uh, was just a train wreck. You know,
Mm.
failure after failure, and trouble after trouble, and struggles after struggles, and again, I didn't know any different, so I just figured that's the way life was. So I
Mm.
just kept going for 25 years that way, and then I realized that I got to a point of sadness and depression and frustration, to the point where I just said I don't want to live anymore. If this is life, it's just so angry and sad, and in in my eyes, it was not worth living. So I
Mhm.
I got to a point, I think it was 2009, that I just said I don't want to live anymore. This is not worth it. So
Mm. That's a dark place to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
and for no reason. You know, it it's just the tricks that our mind plays.
Mm.
I don't remember who told me this, but once, but you know, it's a punctuation issue, because they say what you think you are,
Mhm.
but it's a matter of where you put the comma, because it's what you think, comma, you are.
Mhm.
So if you think you're a failure, if you think you're sad, if you think you're a loser, if you just think there's no hope, that's what
Mhm.
you are.
Right.
And so, and then, you know, 20 years later, I can say in Romans, it says, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. It's all in your mind.
It
So,
is. Yeah, Proverbs 4, I think 24 it is in the NCV version. It says, be careful what you think because your thoughts run your life. And they do. I mean, it's all up here, unfortunately, because we can't get away from it sometimes. So it's really hard to win that battle. And so you were at a really low point and saying you were done with life. How did you, like, what changed to get you out of that? Because clearly you're here. So
Right. Well, I'm still here. Um,
yeah.
it was in the back of my mind, my mom lost a cousin when she was very young to suicide. And
Oh.
I always heard my mom's voice in the back of my mind, always saying, "Oh my God, don't ever do that. That's the worst thing you could ever do. That's the worst thing. It just takes all your troubles and gives them to the people who love you." And
Mm,
so even in my own mind, thinking that if I was gone, it would be the best thing, there was always that little voice in the back of my head saying, "Well, you can't do that because Mom said not to."
right, right.
And and so
I,
it's just it was a struggle for years and years and years of not wanting to live, or it wasn't years, but at the end it was a long time of not want to live, but what to do next.
mm,
And so just by chance, I was driving through town on a Sunday and said, "This is the last chance." I remember going to that church when I was a little kid, and so what the heck? I'll go in and sit and see what they have to say. My goal was to prove that even God can fix anything.
mm,
And so I snuck in that little church where I went to when I was a kid, and I recognized a lot of faces from town, and I saw a lot of strange looks,
mm,
because on the outside people don't understand what's going on your inside. And
right.
so I remember seeing a lot of stares from the people in church saying, "Oh my God, if Dan Thompson's in this church, there's something seriously wrong." And
Yeah.
Barb Dwyer, who I knew as a child, was the pastor at the time. And
Hmm.
she could see from the pulpit that if Dan's here, something's wrong. And so when she finally said the benediction at the end, she hiked up her robe and she hightailed it to the back of that church and made sure she caught me before I got out the door. And she made me promise to come back next week. And
Oh.
all I cared to do at that point was just wanted to leave. I'm like, I did it. I'm going out of here. I'm leaving. And so the whole next week of struggle was, oh my God, I don't want to live, but now I got to at least live another week because I told Barb I'd be back next Sunday, and
Right.
right. So they're little coincidences. The you don't realize God's master plan, and you
Mm,
have all these little coincidences and little run-ins with people, and I say micro relationships with people that at the right time, those just seem to pop back up and prop you up and nudge you and steer you in the right direction. And
mm,
several friendly faces and people I knew growing up in the church, and they,
right.
all with the right encouraging word at the right time.
Mhm.
And so little by little, I kept going back a little more. And then the right person would say, "Oh, you should sing this song with us." And then the right one, I
Mm.
remember Lou Perry saying, "Oh, been here long enough. You should be a trustee." And I'm like, "I'm week 3."
Oh goodness. That is very typical of the church, though.
Yeah. So it's just when you step back and look at it now, it's just so masterful of the right people encouraging you to go the right places in the right times. And I remember Marty Fors was a retired pastor, was also
Yep.
a member of the church, and he
Mm,
kind of tucked me under his wing, and he'd talk to me now and then and give me little bits of advice. And he really encouraged me to go on the walk to Emmaus,
mhm.
a 72-hour retreat for men. And
Yeah.
again, being a people pleaser, I'm like, "Oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. That sounds like a good idea." And then
Right.
Stan Francis signed me up to be my
Yeah.
sponsor, and next thing you know, I'm in a car headed off to Burlington on a Thursday night, and they're dropping me off in this church with no phone and no keys and no car. And I remember saying, I think I'm at a fair ride, and it says if you're not this tall, you can't go on this ride. And I remember
Right.
thinking, oh my God, I'm not this much of a Christian. I shouldn't be here on this walk. And, you know,
Right.
on day one, I had to pay $1 million to get out of that church.
Oh my
And by
goodness.
Sunday night, I had to pay $1 million to stay another day. You know,
Uh,
you
isn't that
know,
amazing?
it was, it's just such a dose of unconditional love from
Mhm.
equally yoked men from all over, all different races and religions, all at the same place, encouraged by men who had been there before that are further ahead, and just encouragement and love and support. And that was really the eye opener. So I think that was in the fall of '09.
Mhm.
And so that was the biggest eye opener for me. That said, I remember um, kneeling at the altar with Marty. Marty was a spiritual director on that walk. And
Oh,
I
nice.
remember on Saturday night, I was kneeling at the altar and I was just crying for who
Mm.
knows why, just overcome with emotion. And Marty was talking me through it. And he says, look at him up there on the cross, and he died for your sins.
Yeah.
And so it really developed a taste for, you know, the, the joy and the optimism and the hope that it brought.
Mhm.
And so after I got back from that weekend, I was just hungry for the next step. What can I do? I finally stopped thinking about myself and stopped thinking about, death for a minute. And
Mhm.
someone at the church said, "Oh, there's a missions meeting Tuesday
Mhm.
night." And so raised my hand. I said, "I'll go to that." And they started talking about Guatemala. And I was like, "Oh, sign me
Mhm.
up. I have no idea where I'm going, what I'm doing." And so Patrick Ham was the leader of that trip. And
Mhm.
even though I still wasn't a Christian, I was learning, and he allowed me to join the team and go down. And lo and behold, those 100 little girls down at the James Project just
Mhm.
sealed the deal, saved my life, and
Mhm.
here we are
Yeah,
today.
that's another dose of unconditional love, isn't it? Their sweet little faces.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's quite a
yeah,
powerful thing. Yep. So, um, being that low, you said it's these micro relationships and different people that come across your path, but you had to be ready too. There, if you think about it, was there another time in your life that you probably would have shoved that stuff aside? Like, do you feel like you had to be in a certain mindset of your own? Like, it sounds like you had kind of given up on trying to do it your way.
yeah. I guess by walking through the church door was some admission of that I need help. It wasn't a mental choice of I've given up. It was kind of like my body just walked itself in there, and my body said, "We're going to make the move for you, even though your brain's not ready for it yet." Um,
Yep.
and so it's just you don't you never know what to expect when it comes to God. So excuse
Yeah.
me,
And yep. When
sorry.
we talked before, that's okay. You mentioned that when Joanne and I were talking, and we were talking about people feeling kind of low to go and find somebody else lower. But you had said something kind of interesting that struck me, because you said that when you're in that spot, you don't think there is anybody lower, right?
Right? Yeah, you you find joy in the bottom of the pit.
Mm,
Um, because we wallow around in our self pity, and when you get to wallowing in self pity, there's nothing better than being at the bottom of the pit.
mm,
You get to it almost challenges you. Like, life sucks. It's always bad. Look around. Everybody's got it better than me, and I'm the worst of the worst. And if you
mm,
see someone that you think is going through something worse, you can talk your way and commit. No, no, I've got it worse. I'm worse than them. I'm this and happened to that, and
mm,
so it almost becomes comforting to
mm,
be at the bottom.
mm,
And because I don't know, because one of the one of the things I would tell people is when somebody's struggling, one of the worst things that you can hear from the bottom of the barrel is you shouldn't feel that way,
mm.
because we can't
Yeah,
control our feelings. We don't control what makes us feel bad. We can only
right.
control the actions of after the thought or the feeling comes. So when people say you shouldn't feel bad, all you
Mm,
do is recite in your mind all the million things that have gone wrong, and you're looking at them smiling, and you say, "Well, these are all the reasons I feel bad," and
mhm,
but they don't know it. And because most of the time when you're, when you're in the dark spots, the depression or whatever, you hide
Mhm.
it from all those people around you.
Mhm.
And so it becomes a game, it becomes a challenge, and it becomes,
Hmm.
no matter how bad it is, it becomes comfortable because that's what we know.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
so it's kind of like the first step of getting out of the darkness is accepting that you don't know what's next.
Mm.
And then as you learn to walk with God, it's the same thing is, you don't need to know what the next step is. You just got to keep stepping. And
Mhm.
so the first step to getting out of the mental darkness is to just start walking, even if you don't know where you're going, if you don't know what you're doing,
Right.
just go and do something and
Hmm.
get out of your own way. I've
Yeah.
spent most of my life being in my own way.
I think a lot of us do. You're not alone in that. Yeah, and the way I explain learning to follow God with my kids when they were younger, because I didn't really start following him till I felt like I really needed to, which was parenting and homeschooling. So I was in my late 20s before I was like, oh yeah, I need to reinvest in what I grew up with. And so for me, it was like giving up my whole plan, as far as teaching and all of that went, because I thought I had a good one, and trusting that if I took one step, it was like standing on the edge of a river, in this raging water, and each like there was this one little rock there that he was saying, you can step on this, trust me a little bit, right? So I step out on that little rock, and it was like, okay, it's not slippery, it's not moving, I'm not getting wet, and so then I would step out on another one, it was a little bit bigger, just that progression of learning to trust him with things, even though you see all these things around you that feel like are going to fall apart if you don't control them or you don't orchestrate things. And that was my issue, is control. So allowing the raging waters around me to not take my attention and just focus on the next rock in front of me, till I was on a much bigger one where the water's down below and I'm feeling pretty good, and
Right.
trusting that you got a plan even if I don't know what the next step is. So,
Yeah.
but it is a process for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It is a slow and careful walk.
Mm.
But sometimes you just have to take the leap of faith. You
Yeah.
know,
I was not.
one of the guys on the walk to Emmaus said, "You just get to the end of all you know, and you just jump into the darkness, and you just
Mm.
trust that one of two things will happen: that either there'll be a soft place to land, or you'll learn to fly."
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great analogy. Yeah. It
So
is. It can be scary though when you've run your whole life the way you wanted, even though you failed a million times over. It's still giving up that illusion of control, because it's really not control, but giving it up and handing it over to him is it's tough. It's a
yeah,
tough journey.
yeah, that first trip down to Guatemala was definitely a leap of faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was it like? I mean, whole new world.
Yeah. It was especially scary. Um, my I was divorced young, and my kids had quite a bit of Catholic upbringing between their mother and their mother's parents, their grandparents on their mother's side.
Mhm.
And so they had a much more faith background than I'd had. And
Mhm.
so when I talked about the trip, I convinced my son to go with me. And let's see, '09. So he must have been um, 13, 14 years old.
Mhm.
And so I got him to go with me. And so it gave me a little confidence, someone go along, and it's kind of like going out in the dark when you have a little kid with you. You feel much braver and bolder than if you're by yourself, because
Yeah.
you got to protect them, you got to act big and strong. And so
Mhm.
it was really scary going to a third world country, because the first day we landed, we spent the first night in the hostel in the city, and he got some sort of travel bug.
Oh
And
no.
so here I was in a razor wired gated community when my teenage son is violently ill and throwing up all night long, and I can't speak the language, and I can't take him to the doctors, and I can't take him to the hospital. And It was literally the first night I spent the whole night just on my knees praying, and I didn't even know how to pray. I didn't even know what I was praying for. I just knew that I
Yeah.
was hopeless and helpless, and
Mm.
um, it was a really a baptism by fire when it comes to prayer.
Yeah, it sounds that way.
We had our own little room out in the garage, and he took it like a champ and got up in the morning and he felt better, and nobody even knew that he was sick, and nobody knew that I didn't sleep a wink all night, and nobody I didn't even know that it was an answered prayer or what it was. I just knew that we got through it, and off we go the next day and drive to the projects. It's a 3-hour ride out through the countryside to get to the project, and it's just massive input overload. You
Mm.
think about a newborn baby when they first are born and they're opening their eyes. It's just that first trip down is just every aspect of it is so overwhelming. You're taking in the country, you're taking in the culture, you're taking in fear, you're taking in learning courage, and it you can't even process the whole week the first time. I was crying all the time. I didn't know what I was crying about, you know, and
Yeah.
seeing all these little kids and hearing the stories they were going through, and they were all smiling and happy and lovey, and
Yeah.
it but one thing that kept me focused was, I've always been work and goal oriented. And
Hmm.
so our project for that week was to build this giant playground that we had taken on much more than was quite possible. And so we spent the whole week building the playground, and I spent every waking hour cutting boards and screwing screws, and hell or high water, I was going to build this playground. And I found myself shunning kids away because they were annoying me because I need to get this work done. And um, they kept coming over, bringing me a drink and smiling and laughing and playing and giggling. And I was trying to work, and
Yeah.
I wasn't getting it at the time. I was trying to earn my way instead of, you know,
Hmm.
accepting that the way has already been made.
Yeah.
So there's a scripture in the Bible that says, what makes God will tear down, but what God makes will last forever.
Mm.
Well, lo and behold, on the second trip down, I go down and the whole playground was deteriorated. The termites had eaten all the lumber and things were falling all apart.
No.
But all the kids still loved me and remembered me. And you said, "Oh, you made the playground for us, and we love you so much, and you did this and that." And it was really, really eye opening to realize that it wasn't the playground that they loved; it was me.
Hmm.
You know, and that's
Yep.
it's it's when you get that it's the relationship that matters,
Hmm.
whether it's the relationship between you and another person or it's relationship between yourself and God.
Hmm.
Um, it's not the rules, it's not the work, it's the relationship that matters. So
Right. Even if we never did another thing for him, he would still love us the same. That's the
right,
neat thing, you know?
right,
Yeah. And isn't it funny how he'll use the kids like that? Like those kids were trying to tell you all week, it's about us.
yeah,
But you were focused on the work. Yeah. I had a similar experience to that when Zori was younger. She's very different. Her and I are very different personalities. So it was hard. It was harder to connect with her. And I would spend mornings like praying in this office, like, God, you got to help me to just be a better mom, really connect with her. And then inevitably, like I'm trying to like really focus on my Bible study, right? And trying to work on this, and she'd come in and crawl up in my lap and ask me to tell her about the day she was born, like every morning for 2 weeks. And until it finally dawned on me that God was trying to show me how to connect with her better.
right,
Because that story inevitably is, how happy we were to meet her that first day. And every day that she wakes up, I should be just as happy to see her and connect with her and figure out a way to bring our personalities together. Fortunately, now that she's 16, we're in a much better place. It took some time though, because
yeah,
personalities are just, they clash sometimes. So I really had to wrestle through that. But when I finally realized what God was trying to get through to me, I was like, oh, okay. Because I would get annoyed. I'd be like, I just told you this yesterday. So it
right.
took a couple weeks. So I feel you. Yeah, he does use those kiddos, doesn't he? So, were you a Christian after that trip?
Um, it was still in the deal. I still remember. Um, I don't remember the exact timeline, but it was probably like a year after that. I was
Hmm.
doing some work for um, a guy who turned out to be a retired pastor, and I thought that I was loud and proud, and I thought that I'd gone from the dark side to the light side, and I knew, and I was walking the walk and talking the talk, um,
Hmm.
and I thought I got it, and then I remember him asking me, "So are you going to go to heaven or not?"
Oh.
And and I remember answering like, "But yeah, I haven't done anything bad. I haven't killed anybody. I don't murder anybody. I don't steal. I'm a good guy. Of course I am." And I since learned that that's the most common answer you always get.
Yeah.
And I remember him in all his grace just leaving me be and saying, "Well, yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with it. You got to trust Christ."
Yeah.
Um I just remember walking away from that conversation saying, "Man, I thought I was getting it, but it kind of
Yeah.
implied that I'm not getting it." And and
Yeah.
so I don't know. I'm a slow learner when it comes to the hard things, I guess. And so eventually, I can't put a, a date to the time when I finally got it.
Hmm.
But it took a lot longer than it should have.
I
But then I
hear
realized that you know at any minute of your time with God, you can look back and say, "Boy, I thought I knew last year where I was. Now I'm in a good spot now." And then a year from now, you can do the same thing and say, "Oh
you.
man, I didn't know squat back then. I know it all now." And then the
Right.
next year goes by, and you're like, "How can this keep happening?" But you never get it. It's a constant learning curve, and it's not it's not a point to get. It's a point to keep going towards.
Right. And the nice thing, like the Bible says, he brings us from glory to glory. So in his eyes, when we accept him, we're already in glory. And he's just helping us grow to another level of glory, which is a beautiful thing. So, and I think a lot of people, I don't think a lot of people have dates that they can put. I don't have a date I can put on it. It is a gradual thing. And some of us are slow learners in that. But I always tell my kids it doesn't matter how long it takes to get something. He's happy with any movement in his direction. Like he's cheering us on. He's the biggest cheerleader for any movement in his direction. So, and he's not condemning us when we're moving in our own direction the opposite way. He's just lovingly waiting for us to turn around and realize that's the wrong way to go.
And he's constantly encouraging us and applauds our walk. But
Hmm.
when we fail and fall and go the wrong way, he picks us back up and it's just like it never happened. And it's just, all
Right.
right, get back on track and keep good on going. You know,
Yep.
I think
Like the best
people,
dad ever.
a lot of people fear following Christ because they don't know what to expect, and a lot of
Hmm.
people fear following Christ because they don't think they're worthy or they're not good enough or can't be good enough or don't trust themselves or I'll never be perfect. And so
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's
So
okay.
yeah, it's a constant everyday battle, and none of us are perfect, and none of us will ever be perfect. And so the you just try to get closer every day. And
Yeah. Yeah, to him. Yeah. And I think the thing that people don't realize about that mindset of, I didn't do anything horribly wrong. I didn't murder anybody. I don't steal, I should go to heaven. Like, I mean, if there's some place good for me to go, I should be able to go. But what that does, and I don't think people realize it, is that discounts what Jesus did. Like it's basically saying he didn't need to die for my sins. I'm not that bad. Do you know what I mean? He didn't need to suffer on the cross. He didn't need to come and live the life he lived and be ridiculed and mocked and beaten within an inch of his life and then die on the cross for my sins. I'm okay, And it's when we put it in that perspective, it's like, no, he actually did, and I don't want to discount that. So, yeah, we can't. There's a little book by Andy Stanley that's called. I think the title is. Um, how good is good enough, I think, and it just walks you through that process. Like there is no good enough that would accomplish perfection. And God is perfection, so we can't get there without Jesus. He is the only way. So,
Mhm.
yeah, but I think a lot of people feel that way, that they haven't done anything so bad.
Right. And I can't speak for women because I happen to be a man, but I
Mhm.
think it feels like it's difficult from a man's perspective because we are taught to, work for it and earn it, and you get your rewards for working hard and what you did and didn't do, um and it's a hard to grasp the concept of it's already been done, it's already yours, you just got to accept it.
There's no work to do
Right.
other, yeah, receive, which is, yeah, it is. It's hard. Yep.
Early on in one of Pastor Barb's sermon, she was speaking on this exact subject, and she was talking about, we're already living in victory. We're not fighting for victory. We're already living in victory. And
Hmm.
well, lo and behold, just up the road a few miles, there's a small town called Victory. And
Yeah.
even church, and I went to the Bagel Depot in Lindenville, and someone asked me, how you doing? And I was on fire from her sermon, and I said, oh, I'm living in victory. And they turned to look at me and said, there's a lot of snow up there, isn't there?
That's funny.
Yeah. So you just shake your head and
Yeah.
say, yeah.
Yeah.
um,
Yep. I'm sure there is.
but yeah, it shows you that most of society doesn't grasp that it's not what we do, it's what he's already done.
Hmm.
And that's one of the a very large hurdle to get over. And
Yeah.
hard that I still struggle to accept it. I
Hmm.
still try to find myself earning way or pleasing him or whatever, and he's already pleased with me just because you know, I'm his.
Exist.
Talk to him. It
Right.
doesn't make him any happier than that. So,
Right.
but it's a daily struggle.
Hmm. And that verse comes to mind: if the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. And so that to be free from that work mindset it's a constant renewal of the mind, to remind yourself it's not about what I do. It's not even about me. He just loves me because he loves me. And I don't have to do anything to earn it. I can't make him love me any more or any less by anything I do. So it is a freeing mindset if you can trust that Jesus did in fact die for your sins, um and he wants to love you like that. So yeah,
Right.
I think part of it too is, um we as humans are not unconditionally loving very well. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
we're just not. So to try to grasp that mindset of, or that understanding, and even Paul in Ephesians talks about, it's his love is not something you can fathom, but I pray that you can know how high and deep and wide and long his love is for you, because it is such an unfathomable concept to our little brains, especially when we don't treat each other that way sometimes.
Right. And when we allow our brain to even allow Christ into our thoughts, then
Mhm.
we're overcome with guilt, um,
Mhm.
for all the wrongs we have done,
Mm.
and so we convince ourselves that no, he can't forgive that, or we convince ourselves that what we've done is it matters, and it doesn't matter to him anymore.
Right,
You know,
right.
he forgave us before we did all those. So,
Mhm.
um,
And he's not, keeping score of the things we get right, you know?
right.
So, yeah, yeah, yeah. So you went down that first time with your son, and that was quite an experience. When did you go down again? Did you go down right the next year? What
Yeah.
did you do?
So I went down. Patrick was the team leader, and I went with him in 2010 with my son. I went down with 2011 with both my son and my daughter, and then I went back in 2012 with my daughter.
Mhm.
Um, and then Patrick was called to go in a different direction, and he had some life changes. And so 10, 11, 12, I went in 2013. Nobody went, and
Mm.
I felt a void. And it's like, how come nobody went? And they said, well, nobody's the leader anymore. The leader's gone. And
Mhm.
so I just was so fired up from the project. I said, well, no problem. I think I can do it. And Aaron Warner, who had been a couple times with us, and so I convinced Aaron. I said, let's do it together.
Mm-hmm.
And so Aaron and I teamed up and he got a group from his area up in Orleans, and I got a group from down here, and we threw together a team of 26 people, our first team in 2000. Let's see, 10, 11, 12, 13, nobody went. So 2014, and it was a nightmare. It
Mm-hmm.
was, we were such bad leaders. And when we got back, we couldn't wait to touch ground and run and find Patrick Ham in Sheffield, wherever he was, and just apologize for all our disobedience and anything we did to not encourage him as a leader. And it was such a bad experience that we didn't do it again in 2015 because
Wow.
it was, and it's hard to describe. It just didn't go right.
Mm.
So then 2015, nobody went again, and God just said, "It's nobody's going to do it. Might as well be you." So I got back on the train and took what I learned, and one thing I did find is, you can't have two leaders.
Yeah,
Because
that's tough.
people, depend upon what you say or don't say, they just go to the other one, and
Oh.
so 15, I got Aaron back on board as my secret helper. And I said, okay, Aaron, I'll be the leader, and you just come along, and we'll co-lead in the dark. You'll be the in the dark co-leader, and we'll just meet every night after closed doors and go over what to do and how to do this. And
Oh,
um,
that's
that made it much easier when there was just one focus and one direction. And then Aaron had children and wasn't able to go the years after that, and so um, then it was just me.
yeah.
But
He did go the year that I went, though. I think it was 2018 when we went with you because he helped us get down there because you were already there
yes,
with the team. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that 2018 year, I think there was 46 people that went that year. I was down there for 3 weeks straight with three
Yeah,
different teams.
that's crazy. Yeah. So how many people total do you think you've taken down?
I'm guessing somewhere around 300 now.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, it's very uh, I say self fulfilling, because you can only have that once in a lifetime experience one time, but when it's a mountaintop experience, you want to have it over and over and over again. And so I was just so on fire for that feeling that I just constantly encouraged new people to go all the time so that I could relive it through them. And every time somebody new would get that wow aha moment, I'd be just like, "Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool?" Um,
Yeah.
so it was very self fulfilling to
Mhm.
go. The greatest thing we come back with is perspective. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
perspective on our lives, perspective on Christ and what He can do if we let Him. Um,
Mhm.
so that's what just keeps going over and over and over again. And every year I say, I don't know if I'm going to do it again. I don't know, but I didn't expect to go the first time, and so
Right. And God keeps bringing people for you to bring down. I mean, that's good.
yeah, I even this year you know, now that I've got 5 grandbabies, and time
Mhm.
is of the essence, and life is busier and crazier than ever. And
Mhm.
I just a couple weeks ago said something to Caroline. It's like, I don't even know if we'll have a team ready or to go next year, or what God has in store. And that Sunday we walked into church up in West Burke, and no more than walked through the door, and Joe walks up and says, I think I'm going to go with you guys next year.
So there you go.
Caroline looks at me and says, see, guess we're going.
Yep. Yep. Oh, that's great. Well, you have such a unique perspective, I think, when you bring a group down because of how much it's affected your life and what a seed it was in the beginning of your walk with God. Do you know what I mean? Because it was so early on in that.
And also blessed over the years to have some very seasoned Christians go along, and to see the experience that they have. You think that, oh, they've seen it all, they know it all, and it knocks them to their knees and breaks them down to tears. And to see full grown, I've seen military veterans that have been through combat, that have seen terrible things, and just broken down to tears. um I remember Scott Turner went with me. This first trip he went, I brought him down. I met him through the Emmaus community, and he wanted to go
Yep.
with me. And we did a VBS at the local dump.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got back to eat dinner, he was just sitting at the table crying and crying and crying. And I said, Scott, what's the matter? And he's like, I just feel so guilty. He says, last week before we left on our trip, I went through McDonald's drive-through and I was pissing and moaning because my French fries were cold.
Oh.
And he was feeling so guilty that he had thought that it was so important for him to complain about cold French fries after we got done to VBS at the local dump.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that perspective is huge. It really, really is. Yeah. And we've had this conversation before where people will say, especially when you're asking them for money for a trip, and they'll say, why don't we just send down the money? Why take the time and the energy and the extra money to actually send people? Like, wouldn't it just be better to send money? And we've had this conversation many times, but what is your take on that? Because I
yeah.
agree with you. I think it's good to share.
I always go back to the old additive where if you give someone a fish, you'll feed them for a day, but if you teach them how to fish, they'll eat for life.
Right.
That first year, my son asked me, he said, how much is this going to cost? Because we never have any extra money. And I told him it's a couple $1,000s or whatever. And he said, well, wouldn't it just be better for them if we send them the money than to spend that money to just go see them? And the problem is if you just mail them the money, then they may feel a blessing for a moment, but we've already talked about it. It's the relationship that's more important. And, I even get riffed from some people in the local community that will tell me, oh, I'm not going to support your trip. I want to support locals and I want to support the local need. But we as team members that go down and visit the project get so much more than we could ever give. I mean, those children have what we need, They have hope. They have seen the dark. They are engulfed in an environment of unconditional love, and they're wrapped with God's blanket down there in such a loving environment. And you can almost say they don't need anything because they have all they need.
Right.
But the organization itself needs the financials to run it.
Right.
And so if you just mail the money down, the organization will have money to operate. But it's the stories that you tell and the stories that you share. So if Zachary and my son and I, if we would have just mailed them $2,000 in 2010 and left it at that, then we want to get to meet the kids, and we want to get to find out about the sponsorship program and have relationships with the kids down there. And then we want to get to share it with people traveling to and from and tell stories about it. And then you don't get the team next year. And then, now we're 300 people in, and 300 people all go down and sponsor children, and they come home and they're on fire. They raise money for local charities, and they do more than they would have. So it's just so much bigger than you can grasp than just writing a check and sending some money. That the whole picture is just mind-blowing how it works.
Well, and that's the pushback I give too when people say that to me. I'm like, if I didn't ever leave this area, I might do some nice things, we might still deliver food for the senior center or something. But when I come back from there, my perspective is so different that I see needs better. Do you know what I mean? Because you've spent a week practicing just being the hands and feet of Jesus, nothing else. No, you don't have to worry about laundry or cooking or anything else. That's what you're focused on. So you come back with that practice, those muscles that have, gotten some work. So you're more apt to participate in the community. You're more apt to help out in a need that you might not have seen before because you haven't, you've just been so stuck in your own little world,
Yeah, we need to get outside of our comfort zone to, just think about, you live over in the Littleton area, and think about how many times you stop at the same gas station to gas up your car, and you stop at the same grocery store and get your loaf of bread and your gallon of milk, and you go to the same entertainment place, whether it's a movie theater, bowling, and think about how many people just in Littleton that you don't know,
Right.
you know.
Right. Hmm.
And so when you get outside your comfort zone and you realize that you don't need to know somebody to do something kind,
Right.
and it helps just free you when you get back home to help just for the sake of helping and not for because it's someone you know or something you do.
Hmm. Yeah. And the other part of it is the project is so good at letting those kids know how far we've come. Like they don't take it for granted that we travel down there. So showing up for them speaks volumes. Do you know what I mean? To For them to know that we traveled an entire day to get down there and we're spending a week there with them, and our, our little world up here is freezing, and do you know what I mean? Just it lets them know that they are seen and they are loved by more than, I mean, the people that are around them are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but it adds to the love that they feel. And also the staff. I mean, um, when we went down in August, Zori wanted to wash feet. She felt really strongly that she wanted to wash the staff's feet. And it was funny because none of the house dads wanted us to see their feet except for Papa Hugo. He came with his wife, and Zori gave a little message, and then we washed feet. And he said later that day he really needed that. Like, he needed that time and he needed that refreshment. And so, because it's a hard job, so even for the staff to know that we care and we see them and we know the hard work that they're doing all year long, and we encourage them and we bring them down presents and trail mix that they can't get down there, and it's very impactful for a lot of different reasons, and including back home. So I agree. I think it's much better than just sending the money.
Yeah, and it's a nice analogy for them because you know, if you think about it from their perspective, all these gringos come down from the States and come down and visit us.
Hmm.
What did we do for that? You know, we didn't deserve that, and we have nothing to give them but
Hmm.
love.
Hmm.
And it's a direct correlation to Christ. Is He loved us even though we didn't do anything to deserve it or earn it. So it's kind of like an affirmation of the unconditional love that the project does and instills in them from the minute they land on the project. Um,
Yeah.
and then it's almost like, I can't believe this is happening. And then when teams come and visit, they're like, oh, now I can actually see it happening. I think
Hmm.
it helps, the kids accept unconditional love because they're getting it, they're seeing it, they're feeling it, and they're they're not doing anything for it. And I
Right.
think that's why it makes us feel so good when we come home, is because at the end of the day, we didn't really do anything for them. We went down there and as soon as you step foot on the court, they love you unconditionally just because you're there. And you're
Hmm.
like, but we haven't built your bunk beds and we haven't planted your trees and we haven't painted your buildings or whatever we have in mind for a project to help them out. They already love us anyway.
Yep.
So there's so much, you know, visual,
Mhm.
correlation to scripture to what happens, and you
Yeah.
know, it's if we see it and feel it and do it, sometimes it's easier to grasp than if we just think it.
Yeah. Yeah. And just imagine what it must be like for them to open the envelope with the check in it.
Right.
Yeah. And so you were talking about relationships, and I know that and the project. So it made me think of the one of the girls that I sponsor during sponsorship night. The second year that we were there, she told me her whole story, which was pretty dark. And but the one thing that amazed me was, as dark as it was, and it didn't like magically change once she got to the property, but she explained every detail of the night that she arrived. It was raining, it was late, she was in the back of a police truck, but as soon as they drove through that gates, she felt a peace. And it is just different there. And I know that you've had a similar experience with, well, I mean, an experience with a sponsorship as well that has been long standing. So tell us about Lydia.
All right. So I met Lydia the very first week we were there. It was a crazy chaos, you know,
Hmm.
combination soccer basketball night game, 100 kids. There was 25 team members running around just laughing and having a ball, and I was playing soccer, and this little 12-year-old girl, Lydia, she kept calling me a cheater, and I didn't know what Dramboso was. And so whatever, she kept calling me a Dramboso all night long, and we were just bashing each other back and forth. And I would just say or do anything that made her smile, and she was
Right.
just a blast. And then when I learned about the sponsorship program and that, I could write letters to her, and it turned out that the week we were there, it was her birthday. And so I
Oh,
thought, well, I guess this is a sign. So when
mhm,
when we left, I told her that I was going to be her sponsor, and she cried and cried, and it was so important to her to have someone love her. And
mhm,
so year after year, I go back and visit her on her birthday, and I would think about the sponsorship programs that they have on TV where they just show you a picture of a child and they say mail $35 or whatever. Who knows if it's even a real picture or a real child or where your money's going? And I'm like, well, for $35, I can come here and hug this child and play with this child and bring them presents and
mhm.
get to know them. And so I ended up sponsoring her year after year after year until she left the project. And then I thought it was over. It was kind of a sad. The next year I went back. I didn't expect to see her, and but back then it was all the same kids year after year after year. So
Stayed
during
longer.
the week when I was at the project, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if I can pick another kid or something. And one of her friends that happens to be a year younger was still at the project says, oh, Lydia still lives right here in Monhouse. You should go find her. And so
Sweet.
we just kept in touch. And so she's just always lived in the community. And it was, a treat to, fill the dad role of a child that didn't have a dad. So
And not only did she not have a dad, her mom was not good to her either, right? That's why she ended up at the project.
yeah, her mom was abusive to her, and her mom murdered her dad, and so she
Oh,
was in jail, and so
mm,
she had nobody. She had no siblings and no mom, no dad, or nothing.
mm.
So
Yeah. So she was grateful for you, I'm sure.
yeah, so
She still,
she calls me dad, and now she has 3 children. They all call me grandpa, and
yeah.
social media we can talk almost daily, and the kids are in school, and she's working, and so here we are, 15 years later, and
Yeah.
3 grandbabies.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that definitely wouldn't have happened if you just sent a $2,000 check that first year.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's just like a giant mushroom cloud. It just keeps growing with stories and relationships. And I'm not a big Facebook person, but I'm more than half of my friends are from
Mhm.
Guatemala. They don't
Right.
speak English. They're all Guatemalan kids that
Right.
I've met through the project, and they get out and they grow older and they get phones and they look you up and they send you friend requests. And
Yep. And it's nice to be able to follow them. Yeah. Yeah. So, what are some of the other experiences that you've noticed that people have had and the 300 people that you've taken down? Is there anybody that sticks out to you about their experience?
yeah, there's you know one of the biggest ones was Reg Abbott, and
Mhm.
went down, and they really caught on fire for the project, and they bought right in and helped support and get started the Women's Redeemed program. And there's a girl from Littleton named Kathy that she liked it so much. Now she starts her own team, and she's got her own thing going now. And
Yeah. Yeah. You're very funny.
um, yeah, and there was we touch relationships with, we got churches that joined us from Glens Falls, New York area, and Scott Turner and Dan, um, that have brought teams down from New York that spun off, that wouldn't have happened if that. And then we started a relationship with the Morgan Church, and a bunch of them went with us. And now they have their own mission team that goes to Guatemala every year. They don't always go to the James Project, but
They
they got
always go.
fire for the country and for the missions. And
Mhm.
if they still have team members, if they can't make their team or their mission, they call me and join us and go. And
Mhm.
so it's non-denominational.
Mhm.
It's just an open invitation to go be hands and feet for God. And it's a blessing of James Project and all the people at Shadow
Mhm.
to not have those burdens or those barriers.
Right.
It's all welcome. Come. come and
Hmm.
see what God can do. And my wife Caroline always says it just seems like once you're on property, the curtain between heaven and earth is a little thinner down there, and
Yeah.
God is a little more clear and just feels a little warmer. And
Hmm. I know that's what everybody, I mean, I have experienced that myself, but everybody I talk to as well. I mean, Tiffany and Brian said the same thing. And of course, Joanne and Carol, that it's just like God's presence is just felt in a different way down there. It's hard to describe unless you go, but it's just so very different.
right, and I think a lot of it has to do with they don't have the stuff to
Hmm.
distract them. You know,
Hmm.
and there's a whole lot less I and a whole lot more we and us down there. And you know they value their relationships, and they know they're in such a tough spot down there that they won't survive without God, and they need God and they need each other. And we are so blessed and spoiled financially up here in the great United States that it's we trust in our stuff. We want our fancy cars and our warm houses and our TV and the full refrigerator, and we don't need God because we have everything. you know and
I
down
know.
there.
Yeah, I went to a conference once, a homeschooling conference, and I was sitting across from, I was older than they were. They were younger moms. I think it was either a homeschooling or a mom's conference. I can't remember, but I was thinking I knew so much, right? Well, this young mom across from me we were talking about just how to stay connected, how to live our faith, basically. And she said, I have to remind myself of the acronym RAIN, that I really am in need all the time. And I was like, oh, that's so smart.
Yeah,
Because we get so comfortable. I talk to my kids about that. When you look at the Old Testament and you see the kings that started out following God and then they got comfortable, and what happens? They start to rely on themselves. They start to think that they don't need God anymore. And so that really are in need. We really are in need all the time of God's grace and his goodness, no matter how comfortable we are. But it's harder to remember that when things are going well and you don't have a want for anything.
yeah, that's one of the questions I always ask myself is why is it that we have to be broken in order to why does God have to be our last resort? And I'm
Right.
number one guilty of it. He was the last resort for me, but why is it so difficult to turn to him sooner? um,
Mm. And but the beautiful thing is he doesn't hold that against us either, though. He's fully aware that we have tried everything else and we are going to him as a last resort. And he still isn't, crossing his arms and saying, well, too bad, you should have come to me first. He doesn't do that. He's
right.
just happy we're turning to him. So it's humbling that he can love us that well.
Yeah, if the
Because
shoe was on the other foot, we'd be saying, I told you so.
exactly. Yeah. And you've had some other experiences that are unique to you going down. Um, like the last trip we took. And I was so glad, and you could tell us about it in a second, but I was so glad that was the last trip before everybody shut down for COVID. To end with that note for the project. I was glad that was how we capped it off. But go ahead.
Yeah.
What
So
was
you're talking about a wedding proposal that occurred on the project. Um,
yes,
uh,
because not everybody gets to have that experience either.
my my wife and I, Caroline and I, were partners, and we were together way back in the '90s. Uh,
Hmm.
but we both had walked a similar walk as children. Had got a little taste of church, but had decided to go our own way, and we were thrown together, and we had what seemed to be a relationship that was far too perfect to be true. Uh, 1993, 4, 5, 6, 7, we were talking about babies and marriage and kids. And I had been married once earlier. It didn't work out. I had young kids. I was still selfish, and I just couldn't grasp the fact that things could be this good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and through some poor choices in life that sparked the beginning of my depression, we ended up breaking up. And she went on to uh, have a family with another guy, and I spiraled from that point on into deep depression, and um, continued to try and find my way. I was like the lost brother going to the foreign lands, just struggling time and time again. I remember going to counseling the first time, and I'm saying, you know, not to be egotistical, but I'm smart and I'm capable and I'm talented. I can do all these things, but why the hell can't I figure out these relationship things? And, you know, the point being is you're in your own way. You know,
Yeah.
stop thinking about yourself if you want to figure out these relationship things. And so I spiraled through counseling and many more marriages and divorces, and just spiraled out of control until that one day that I finally ended up back in church and started to get grounded. And there's a movie, Facing the Giants. One of my favorite scenes is when the janitor goes into the coach and he says, I don't know what to do. And he says, you know, two farmers prayed for rain, but only one of them went out and prepared their fields for rain. And which one of them do you think received the rain? And
Mm-hmm.
so that encouraged me to get right with God. And at that point, my chances were over. I had screwed up with Caroline, and I just knew that God was going to give me something perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that He would bring her back into my life was so far out of the realm of possibilities that it wasn't even on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So lo and behold, you know, her relationship came to an end, and my relationship with Christ was growing. And um, boom, one day we just crossed paths and said, how's it going? And God said, all right, here's your second chance, don't screw it up. and and so we had so that was August 2nd, 2019. After 23 years apart, we got back together, and it was just like no time had been missed. You know,
Wow.
even my brain couldn't even grasp, but there was 23-year void. All I could think about was our time together, and we just clicked. And so I convinced her to go with me on the trip to Guatemala, and
Mm-hmm.
so there was going to be this secret proposal. And I mean, we'd been together for a few months now, and we knew that, you know, this was it. It was right. But because we had both been married and divorced before, she didn't want the same old proposal, or, you know, she wanted something special. So I got it in my mind that down in Guatemala would be a good time to do it. So with the help of the team, all in stealth secret spy mode,
Yes.
we planned and coordinated everything right under her nose. And with the help of the 100 kids and a play and a skit, um,
Mm-hmm.
we proposed to her, and fortunately she accepted. And I can still see the banner here, hangs up over our bed, that the
Yeah.
kids brought out that said, will you marry me? And it was such a great experience for all those kids.
Oh
Um,
my goodness. They were crying. They were so happy
yeah.
to see
And
that.
the house parents mention it every time I go back. Remember when
Mhm.
you had the big proposal and the party and the dance? And yeah, you know,
Yeah.
so it's just, you know, it just has lots of special memories. You know, I remember my mom always saying, like, oh, I remember where I was when, you know, so and so died, or when, you know, we all remember where we were when the planes hit the Twin Towers. You know, there's
Mhm.
certain important things in our lives that we remember. And, you know, so that when you can correlate, you know, positive experiences with godly experiences, that just helps reinforce them all. So yeah,
Yeah.
been very
Yeah.
blessed.
Yeah. And it was so fun. And you had a hard time trusting us with the details, but you were nervous. And I said, why aren't you trusting us? We've got it.
Well, and I was going to be so special for her too, that by
Mhm.
letting go of some of the details, it helped make some of it special for me too. And I thank you girls that all took it, the rain, you above and beyond the fireworks, the flowers, the cakes, just
And we didn't even know about the fireworks. That was a surprise to us. That was the house parents because everyone was like, why are we doing the goodbye party on the basketball court? We never do it on the basketball
right.
court. It's always in the salon, but you can't have fireworks in the salon. So that was why. But yeah, it was so fun. And then the world shut down right after that. We were the last team that year. So
Yeah.
I was really glad to finish it like that with all of the people there. And Mama Carol was there and Lydia was there. It was just, yeah, it was really nice.
Yeah. It was
Everybody
great.
was happy for you guys. So we went down with you. My kids and I went down with you for the first time. And then 3 years, did we go? We went 3 years with you. I
Yeah.
never saw myself leading a team. I did not plan on that. It was the group of people at the church that really wanted a team to go down from our church. And so it just ended up being me. But you went down our first year and it was so helpful. And I don't know, I think I told you how appreciative I am. But if I didn't, it was so helpful to have because I was so consumed with the details, kind of like the first time you went down with the playground. You know what I mean? I was so consumed with making sure everything, all the details happened, that you were able to sit back and just share your story and share your passion for it. And that made the trip. Like my whole team coming back, they were like, Dan's passion for the project was so great. It was so great to hear his story and to meet Lydia. And so my first trip would have been very boring had you not been there. So I appreciate you going.
Yeah, it's always fun to just go and not have to handle the logistics of it.
Details. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, my second trip leading was last year, and I feel bad because I didn't really budget I'm not good with downtime. I don't sit well. So that meant nobody else did either. So I felt bad. They didn't let on how little downtime they had and how it affected them until we got back. I'm like, well, you should have told me while we were there.
Yeah.
But because you're trying to do so much and pack so much in. And I mean, it's good work, but it is tiring
Yeah,
because of
but I think sometimes keeping busy, I think exhaustion helps break down barriers. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you're right in that aspect for sure. One of the last questions: how would you compare? We talked about what life was like for both of us before a little bit. How would you compare that life to your life now? Like, what was it? Life before Jesus and life after Jesus.
yeah, I think it before you focus on Jesus, you focus on yourself, and you think about no matter how capable you are, you're still only one person, so you're only going to help yourself as much as you can help yourself.
Mhm.
But then if you think about, well, if I help everybody else and everybody else helps me, well, now I got the rest of the world helping me, and I get the joy of helping somebody else. And so, a great analogy I compare it to is a school teacher wanted to teach his kids a lesson, so he told them all to blow up a balloon and write
Mhm.
their name on the balloon, and then throw it out in the hall.
Mhm.
So there's hundreds of kids in this school, and then he went out and mixed them all up, and he said, "All right, now you all have 30 seconds. Go out and find your balloon."
Oh wow.
In 30 seconds, and then like two people found their balloon. He blew a whistle. He said, "Stop." He said,
Mhm.
"All right, now you got 30 seconds. Everybody pick up one balloon, read the name on it, and go give that person their balloon."
Mm,
And in 30 seconds, everybody had their balloon. And
yeah.
so when you think about it in that way, you know, we think we're self-serving and we think we're doing great and we think we're doing the best for ourselves, and we're not only not succeeding, but we're depriving ourselves. And
Mhm.
and so that's the biggest thing I would say is after Christ helps me focus on others first,
Mhm.
and not only does that help keep you positive because you're helping others, but when we focus on ourselves, we focus on the negative, and it keeps us from going in the darkness. And so you keep
Mhm.
looking up, keep moving forward and keep looking up. And that's the greatest joy of following Christ is, number one, you're looking up, not down, and you're not doing it alone. He's always with you.
Right, right. So what are some of the things that you guys get to do? I mean, you bring a team down every year, but you're also doing some other things, right?
Yeah, yeah. We always support the local market. We go out and buy some food baskets. We take those food baskets and deliver to some needy people around the villages. Um,
Mhm.
we go visit the local nursing home. We bring them food and snacks, and we sing songs and just give them joy for a day.
Mhm.
Again, just to give somebody some unconditional love for no reason. Um,
Mhm.
we go help the redeemed women and build projects and do things around town, and it's changed so much in the last 15 years now that, at first it was almost strange to be, an American in town,
Mm.
and the project was new, and now after 15, 20 years of the project being there, and everybody realizes what such a blessing it is to everybody who's been through the project. It's such a blessing to everybody that works at the project,
Hmm.
and all the traffic is coming through town. It's a blessing to the community. um, and so again, it's just one of those things that has so many positive repercussions that you didn't anticipate. Um,
Right. And that's just down there. But you also, when you don't just think about yourself all the rest of the year. What are you and Caroline doing? Because you've come to a place in your life where you're now living out your faith on a more regular basis, right? Not just on your trips down. So what do you do in your area the rest of the year?
we do a lot more volunteering, a lot more giving. We have a ministry in our garage called Faith's Closet that
Mhm.
supplies clothes and some small household supplies for needy moms around towns. Um, I find myself filling in at local churches that don't have pastors, doing lay speaking and um, giving sermons on Sundays and volunteering, and it's just a full busy schedule of always trying to do something for just to make somebody else's day better.
Yeah. And you find that much more fulfilling than life before Jesus?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Life is now worth living, would you say?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when you share sermons, what did you ever see yourself doing that?
No, and I still struggle every time I'm asked to do it. Again, I personally I don't feel worthy.
Mhm.
But it's I joke about it sometimes. I tell people, I said, why wouldn't you want to do it? I said, no matter how bad you do it, that everybody's going to applaud you and praise you because nobody else wants to do it. So you can't fail at it. Um,
Right?
but then again, I tell them that it's it's nothing special. You don't have to make anything up. It's all there. It's all written in the Bible, and
Mhm.
you don't even have to try to be unique, because if you just go up and read it, you're doing it different than anybody else would. And then if you just open up yourself and add a little bit of how it affected your life, um,
Mhm.
one of the biggest remarks I get back is, um, "You seem real. You seem relatable." It's almost, I think we look too highly at pastors and think that they're better than us,
Mhm.
because they've been through schooling or something, and they're just one of us. They're
Mhm.
called to serve and preach, and they're sinners, and and for someone to get out of a pew or out of the dark side and go up and share it, it sometimes is comforting for people to say, "Oh, maybe there's hope for me." Or that doesn't mean they want to get up and preach a sermon, but uh, it just so it's nice the fact that people listen and are appreciative and help
Mhm.
out, but it's it's challenging.
Yeah. But I think, isn't that why it's so powerful, is that you're willing to be transparent and say, here's something I read in the Bible and here is how it helped me. That's basically, if we all just did that and we're willing to be, I think we all, especially in social media world, we all want to put on the best face. We all want to look like we've got it all together when we really don't. And so your willingness to stand up there and be humble enough to share something that indicates that you don't have it all figured out and you do rely on this word and this Bible and God to lead your life. I think that's what we need. And I think a lot of times, those are some of the pastors that go to school. Those are some of the best pastors I like to listen to, are the ones that are sharing something about their own life and how the Bible has been applicable for them. So
Right. Yeah.
uh,
So
yeah,
it's
we don't have to complicate
very
it, huh?
very difficult, very rewarding at the same time.
Yeah. 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 It's difficult to be vulnerable, right?
Yeah,
It's very,
absolutely.
yeah. So one of the last things I'll ask you, the kids and I have this quote from Mother Teresa that says, "Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love." And so your life is obviously changed dramatically through Jesus, and you're living a legacy of just small acts every day of loving people well, and it's a beautiful thing. And I'm so thankful that the James Project exists, that and you've been able to have the experiences, and that I got to share a few of those with you. And I'm inspired always by the small acts of love that you like to just live your life doing. It's a great example of that, and a great legacy to leave behind for your kids, your grandkids, and you and Caroline are doing amazing things. So I just want to thank you for being amazing people. But what advice would you give to somebody who is in that dark place that you were, and they're happy in the pit, so to speak, because they know what to expect, that's comfortable, the self-pity is reaffirming. What would you say to somebody who might be listening and thinking, maybe there's something to this living for somebody else thing?
Yeah, I guess the first thing is to just start, and like you said, it's all in your mind. And so instead of being comfortable in the dark or accepting the dark, if you just start thinking, you know, something could be different, you don't even have to convince yourself it could be better. You
Mm,
start thinking that something could be different. And so let's just start with that, because you don't spring out of the darkness right into the bright daylight overnight. It's a process. It takes a long time, and it takes the transforming of your mind. And
mhm,
so if you just start by saying, just let's just do a second at a time or a minute at a time, and just think that this doesn't have to be this way. That's
mm,
a start. And then it'll transform into, well, if it doesn't have to be this way, then how can it be? you know
mhm,
and when you're at the bottom of the pit, you're convinced that it's either the bottom or the top, and that's it, and there's no in between. And so there's no way I can get up to the top, so I might as well just live down here at the bottom. And it's like climbing a ladder. You just got to go one rung at a time, and you just got to accept that, okay, let's just do this one thing and see how it works, and do this and see how it works. And um, you know, talk to, you know, one thing I always told myself is I'm not good at anything.
mm,
And so just out of the blue, ask someone that you love and that you trust, what am I good at?
mhm,
And believe them, because when they say, oh, well, you should do this, you're good at that, and you should do this, good at that, your brain says, no, I'm not good at that. No, I'm not good at that. Well, why would they say it?
mhm,
So you gotta be vulnerable enough to, you know, not ask somebody what should I do, but just say, you know, what kind of things do you think I'm good at or would be good at? And
mhm,
and all you got to do is start thinking about it, and then life changes, and the actions follow the thoughts, but you got to think them first. So you don't have to stay at the bottom of the pit,
mhm,
and you can be comfortable somewhere else besides the bottom. So just think your way out of it. It's a battle, it's a struggle, it's not easy, but somewhere deep inside each and every one of us, God has planted that little seed when we were created, that
mhm,
gives us the ability to turn to Him.
mhm,
And we don't acknowledge it. We don't know what that is. It's just a strange feeling at first, but it will, if we nourish it with positive thoughts and positive thinking, and then just take baby steps, one step at a time.
mhm. Yeah. And like you said, it struck me when you said things could be different, right? I think so many people, they say, or they don't think it can be different because they're not doing anything different. You have to believe that things could be different and then make a different choice, right? Like there has to be action behind the belief, because that whole saying of, doing the same thing and expecting a different result is not
Right.
very smart, right?
Yeah.
So Well, I'm glad that you decided to think things could be different and that you let your body walk yourself into the church and that you had some unhealthy people-pleasing tendencies that led you to do some things that without those unhealthy tendencies you might not have done. So, do you think you're better about people-pleasing now?
I still have the urge.
Yeah.
Nothing bothers me any more than disappointment, no
Yeah.
matter what it is or where it comes from. Um,
Hmm.
if there's disappointment, it must be something, either I did something wrong or I didn't fix it yet. Um,
Right.
and so it's a battle. I definitely still struggle with people pleasing, but um,
Me too.
instead of trying to fix the problem, um, I think before I act better now, and sometimes doing nothing is the best result, and
Mhm.
um, usually, uh, you know, a response of love and unconditional and caring, whether it's just a smile or a sometimes all we have to do is not react negatively and we come off as positive. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's still a struggle, but it's a give it to
It's
God.
Yeah, yeah, it's still a struggle for me too, and I have to find those boundaries of, I don't have to fix that or I don't have to do that. It's actually not even good for me to do that. It would be better if I didn't because it's not in my job description or it's not what he's called me to do right now. So, but yeah, it's hard. It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, I found sometimes to just go away and pray about it
Hmm.
is enough. You
Yeah.
don't. Not everybody needs fixing, um,
Hmm.
and not everybody's asking to be fixed. Maybe even it's the perception you got. So
Right. Right.
sometimes just leave it be and pray about it, and then the right action will come to you
At the
later
right.
if necessary. So
Right, right. And I love that God uses the things that are not so healthy about us sometimes to get us to where we need to be. You know what I mean? Like he could have said, we'll wait till he's through that people pleasing, but he used it to your advantage at that time. Even though it was an unhealthy tendency, he used it to get you to Guatemala and to get you to the walk of Emmaus and, to show you some different things, to show you his love. So I
right,
love that he can use us wherever we're at, whatever stages we're at, whatever we've got, whatever hangups we have, he's still right there ready to say, I'll use it. I'll show you how much I love you through that. That's okay.
right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
sometimes you just got to start walking, and then he'll steer you.
Yep. Can't move a parked car. So, well, thank you very much for your time today, Dan, and for sharing your story and for all that you do for Guatemala. And I speak on behalf of the 300 people that you have brought down. Thank you for being patient with me because I know that first year I went down, I was kind of just observing and I didn't really participate much because I didn't know what to expect or what to think and I had my two kids and it was thank you for giving me the grace to just observe more than jump in that first year. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for going and being willing to take that leap of faith. And now look at what you've got. Now you're sharing the experiences to reaching audiences you don't even know you're reaching, and sharing things that need to be shared. And I appreciate you doing your podcasts, and I'm honored to be part of it. So thank you for
Well,
the invitation, and I will look forward to watching all your episodes from here on.
thank you, Dan.
All right. Well, thank you, and I hope you have a great day. Adios.